All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Trey Sai, and I am the founder of Her Stories Untold and Her Journey Empowerment Society. Basically, it's a global initiative dedicated to sharing empowering, inspiring stories of women in all walks of life. Her Stories Untold is proudly in association with Her Journey Empowerment Society, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting and celebrating the diverse journeys and stories of individuals around the globe. This initiative began as a way to bring visibility to the incredible journeys that women of all groups have taken to become whom they are today. So many of these stories go untold, not because they aren't significant, but because the women themselves don't often realize the power and importance of their experiences. Our mission is to uplift, empower, and inspire women globally. If you feel that you have a story to share, I invite you to visit www.herstoriesuntold.com. Before we begin today's conversation, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I live and work is a traditional and unceded territory of the Kwikwetlem Nation and lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh Muskim Squamish, Kika and Stolo First Nations. Thank you for joining us today, and I am introducing Rebecca or Becky Faye Smith Galli. Here's a little bio about her. If there's one thing best-selling author and columnist Rebecca Faye Smith Galli knows, it's the importance of staying fueled daily. She's had a lot to power through. Her 17-year-old brother's death, two children with special needs that include autism and epilepsy, one of whom passed away, divorce, and her own permanent paralysis, leaving her in a wheelchair. Becky has lived a life filled with unexpected loss and learning. In her book, Morning Fuel, Daily Inspirations to Stretch Your Mind Before Starting Your Day, Becky shares her daily readings, reflective questions, and inspirational stories to help readers fuel up on positivity each morning. Infused with wisdom from her life and those around her, and sprinkled with quotes from great thinkers, Morning Fuel is designed to inspire, encourage, and make you think. The world can wait. First, we feel. So, welcome, Becky. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Trey. It's great to be here.
Welcome. And I wanted to ask you 366 stories. Tell us, why do you want to share your story?
Well, it's interesting. My first book was Rethinking Possible, which was a memoir that told my story, um, everything that you talked about. And one of the questions I kept getting was, how do you do it? How do you keep going through your crazy life? And one of the things I do every morning is when I have my
Oh, I think we're a little bit
lemon
frozen.
water, and they're usually
Oh, I think we got disconnected a little bit.
okay. Well, I'm still here and I could hear you, so I don't know what
Okay, yeah.
happened.
I don't know what happened, but I lost you for a bit. My apologies for that, and really not sure what's going on. Give
Do you want me to continue to share about that?
Can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay. So I think we will try to. Oh, so there we go. I think we're live. We're good. So please continue. So let me re-ask the question just in case
Okay.
just kidding. We had a little bit technical fail here, but the question that I was asking Rebecca here today was why do you want to share your story? Please tell us more.
Yes. As I was saying, the first book that I wrote, Rethinking Possible, was a memoir that told my whole story that you just summarized. And one of the questions I kept getting when I would talk about the book was, how do you do it? How do you keep going every day? And it is, uh, I have a pretty set routine in the morning. I try to get up early, have my lemon water, have my coffee, and then I do some daily readings. I have 5 or 6 books that I choose from that are just short little stories that do that very thing. They inspire, encourage, or make me think. And so through the years, I'd written a column for 12 years, and I had 400 columns on my website of different stories, mine and others. And so I went through and picked the best ones of those, plus new ones, and was always looking at the lens of which stories inspire, encourage, or make you think. And so it was a very laborious process to get them, to shrink them down, to develop the questions. But one of the things that kept me going was my email subscribers to my Thoughtful Thursday. I try to write periodically on Thursdays, and I would just give them updates. This is what's going on. How are things um, where I am in the book process? And so, it really, the reason in general I write was I figured if I've lived this crazy life, I might as well share what I've learned. And if it can be helpful to somebody else, that's great. And number two, to connect me with people. I mean, the wheelchair is very limiting for me. And so if I could reach out to people through words or then why not?
That's amazing. And so, did you want to dive into let us know a little about Thoughtful Thursdays, of what that
Yes,
journey was to start it, and how do people tune in?
sure. So I guess the first writing came about. Why did I even choose to write? Shortly after I was paralyzed in 1997, this is kind of before social media or blogs or anything else like that. Email was just starting. I had a college, high school friend reach out to me. He had heard about my paralysis, and he was like, "Is that you?" And I said, yeah, it's me. I think it's me. At the time, I wasn't sure if I'd be permanently paralyzed or not. So I went through a period of uncertainty. Transverse myelitis affects 1 in a million. A third recover fully, a third recover partially, a third have no recovery at all. So when my friend Scott reached out to me, I described my crazy life, from my kids, my marriage, my divorce, the paralysis that we were still in uncertainty. And then I began to tell him stories about what it was like to live life from the wheelchair. And because of those stories, he liked them and he passed them along to his friends, and I passed them along to my friends and family. And it became like this little group. And so I back then I copied and pasted each one and sent it to everybody that was interested. And somebody said, well, maybe, you should try to get it published. So I had a friend that helped me polish up one about playing soccer, of all things, in the wheelchair with my son, who was in 4 at the time. And that was published in the Baltimore Sun. And because of that publication, I continued my emails to my Thoughtful Thursday group, my email subscribers, but I also got a published column in a local weekly that I did for 12 years. So it was all because of that question, is that you, and me describing my life, that this whole writing gig kind of came about because I was able to connect with my friend and share what I was learning as I was adjusting to paralysis.
Wow, that's really powerful because your story is built on extreme life events. So you got the sudden paralysis, losing your son, and parenting a child with autism, right? So I know in your book, you had mentioned this powerful quote that says, which aligns with what you're just sharing about Thoughtful Thursday, which is if you can't stand up, stand out. So it kind
That's
of
right.
resonates greatly with that, right? So um, turning that strength to visibility, resilience, and boldness, right? In writing and living at the same time. So made you feel the most empowered about, when sharing your story? Like, what has happened really since you started sharing your story? Like, did it propel you to continue, like, push you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I first started out, it was very intimidating, and I was asked to be part of a panel, and I thought, okay, yeah, this is good. I'm not just me. And the title was of the session was "When Life Doesn't Go as Planned."
Hmm.
And so I was with a community of people who had had challenges, from breast cancer to disability within the family to long-term health issues. And and as part of this community of loss, there was still this tremendous positivity that came out about how they were accepting their challenge and still living life fully within that challenge. And it made me feel like there was community among us, and then we could share what we were learning, and we even broadened that community more with the audience. And that was just this amazing feeling, because when you're, just when you're living life from the wheelchair can be very limiting and isolating if you let it. So there has to be constant reaching out from where you are. And that was just so energizing and fulfilling. I decided to just lean into it, write more, connect more. Yes, it was difficult to talk about each one of those losses. I had to kind of develop a formula for saying exactly what I wanted to say, the way I wanted to say it, because if I wasn't careful, I could rip that wound open, and there all that raw pain would be again, and that's not fun to watch. So I had to really develop kind of a tough shell about what I wanted to say the way I wanted to say it. And it still was able to communicate through that.
That's so powerfully strong and this deep emotional resistance, you know? Was there a particular moment you knew you wanted to share? Like, aside from hearing from other people and them, encouraging you to support, was it like one day you woke up and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna share my story.
Well, it's really been a process. From It kind of evolved, from answering my friend's email to being published in
Mhm.
the Baltimore Sun to being a regular columnist in a local newspaper. And then it's like, I need to put the whole thing together. I need to tell the whole story. And that was another whole learning. So the first book took me nearly 20 years to write, just because life kept happening. And it's like, what's that get? That's not quite done yet. And then to put the education under myself to be able to write a memoir, you had to learn about writing. And so in that process, I not only shared what I was learning, but I myself had to get equipped to do what I wanted to do. So I went back to school and got some education. I got coaching, I got editors, all that kind of thing. And it really filled my life with this whole new direction. And I often think that's what you need to do when you've had extreme loss, is to fill that. It can be empty if you want to look at it that way. It can be empty, or it can be open, which is another way I like to look at it, where it's like, oh, I've got room for this now. I can't do this, but I can do this. And that's one of my little cheats, is even though whatever it is, I can still. And to look in that, within that limitation, to see what you can still do within it.
That's a really um, positive way to go into it. And it made me think about, how you mentioned let it develop. It's really a
Yeah.
recurring base in the book. And all the things that you shared so far to hear is really a reminder to wait, reflect, and not rush into clarity, right? So some of the things that you took time for, like you said, going back to school, retraining, all those things and learning new things, right? So that you can begin the process of writing a book, which you mentioned earlier that it took you 20 years to do. So that's just so powerful. So my next question is, how have you continued to choose empowerment and positivity over the years, even when there have been so many setbacks? Because perhaps if you want to share a little bit, what was that moment, you know, 9 days after your divorce, right? And suddenly this happened. How did you transition to empowerment?
That again was a process just because I woke up with shooting pains in my legs. At the time, I didn't know what it was. I called the doctor. He said maybe a potassium deficiency, drink some orange juice. Went back upstairs, got into bed, and 6 hours I was paralyzed from my waist down. So my kids were 9, 6, 4, and 3. And we didn't know if I would walk again. I was extremely hopeful uh, because so many people had recovered, at least partially, 2/3. And so it really put me in this zone of waiting. And that's where I think I learned some of the, I guess, most used lessons about how to get through uncertainty when you're not sure if you're which direction it's going to go. And I used something that a therapist taught me several years before that when my son presented with epilepsy, and we weren't sure if he was going to grow out of them or not. And um, his progress would go back and forth. Some days he wouldn't seize, other days he would, and I it was maddening to me because I didn't know what to hope for. I didn't know what to trust. And the therapist said, why don't you pursue parallel paths? And I'm like, well, what's that? And she said, well, on the hope path, you can envision like that he does grow out of those seizures. And on the reality path or the other path, the one you don't want, it could be he doesn't and he declines. And so what that gave me was permission to envision two different outcomes, but more importantly, it kept me moving. I wasn't stuck in wondering. I could think about this and make preparations for that. And I could think about the other path and make preparations for that. And I used that technique, that parallel paths, when I was going through my divorce. Are we going to stay married or are we going to divorce? I told our therapist I either want an amazing marriage or an amazing divorce. And we have an amazing divorce. And we worked hard at that, but it kept me journeying. The same thing with the paralysis. Would I walk again? Would I not walk again? I made renovations for my house or plans to do it in case I didn't walk again. But at the same time, I was working out 3 times a week with PT and trying to learn how to stand and bear my weight. So I think that's important to figure out how to keep unstuck in whatever loss situation you are, to figure out a way to be active. And it's that concept has served me well, and to feeling like that I was still still doing something that of value.
Thank you so much for sharing. And just very quickly for the audience, in case they're uncertain what transverse myelitis is, of course, this is what I've been reading. It's a rare neurological disorder caused by inflammation of the spinal cord, the part of the central nervous system that sends messages between the brain and the body. This inflammation damages or destroys the protective covering myelin around spinal nerve fibers, disrupting communication and often leading to sudden onset of weakness, as you mentioned, numbness, paralysis, pain, or bladder and other, situation dysfunctions. And it can occur in people of all ages and triggered by infections or other unknown causes. And as you shared, thank you for sharing again. And recovery is unpredictable. Some people, as you mentioned, can regain function, while others maybe it becomes a permanent paralysis. And what I really want to focus and, turn the attention to that segment that you had just shared is that that mindset that you were talking about with your therapist. is when I focus on what I can do instead of what I can't, my heart opens wider. And it was powerful hearing you saying, I'm gonna have you chose the positive divorce as opposed to a different situation kind of thing. So I think you're always like this or that. I'm gonna choose this. So I did you want to talk about this intentional focus? Like, did it take some time to practice as a skill, or it's kind of what you do on a daily basis now?
I think it is a skill that I just now kind of gravitate for it. I've been doing had had a lot of practice doing it, so I think it's kind of my natural tendency right now. And it's interesting when my the same therapist recommended this technique that I think helped with that. The When my son presented with seizures, my daughter was 3 or 4 years old, I think four, maybe three. Anyway, when she would play with other her peers or other little girlfriends, and they would play dolls, she would say, we have to have girl babies because boy babies have seizures. And she had, the therapist called this magical thinking. She was trying to make her world make sense. And she said, what might be a good thing to do is you all have a time at bedtime where you get her to talk about your feelings. And so we would talk about a happy thing, a sad thing, a mixed up thing, and a mad thing. So we call it happy, sad, mixed up, mad. And so we talked about a happy thing, that was easy, a sad thing, pretty easy, a mad thing, pretty easy, but mixed up meant that you looked at something two different ways. For example, it's mixed up. It was raining and the grass needed watering. So that was a good thing, but it rained out her ball game. So that was a bad thing. So you were able to see the same situation two different ways. And I think that just teaching her and teaching myself, repetitively, like there's a couple ways you can always look at things. You have a choice about how you look at things. And I think that's the empowering part, is to realize that you have a choice in how you view your circumstance and what's happened to you. You can look at it as positive light as possible or the negative light as possible. But it also is it either way, it there's a grief process that happens when our life doesn't go as planned. We want it to go one way and it goes another, and you have to acknowledge that. You can't ignore it. Honesty is very important in that aspect.
That's so very true. I think first and foremost is always to be honest with yourself, to be honest with your feelings, and really that exercise, that technique that you just shared with your daughter, the happy, sad, mixed up, mad. I actually really like it. And then you explained how the mix up is two different ways of seeing the situation. And I think that could be something that can be practiced daily because totally it aligns with, when I focus on what I can do instead of what I can't, my heart opens wider. So that's so very true. Um, I know you talked about, you were very deeply reflective about caregiving, both of your daughter who's autistic and through your own recovery and losses. Did you want to maybe share a little bit of how that was for yourself, taking care of Madison, your book?
So it's very interesting. I think because of her needs, and this is 1997, when she was 5 years old at the time, and uh, I had just been paralyzed. My future was uncertain, and we had had trouble at that time. This is before uh, educators or physicians really had a lot of information to give to parents about how to parent a child with autism and what resources we could do to help her flourish. And she wasn't talking. And so she was in an autism outreach program at a local school. We were very fortunate that they had that. And she came home with this little yellow flyer in her backpack that says, "Come see how your classmate Mason learns and learns to talk." And so I was like, well, sure. I mean, I'd only been paralyzed a couple months. Thank heavens the woman's house that had it was accessible. I could go. And we learned about this therapy that was helping her son. And we tried the therapy with Madison. And sure enough, it worked. And she was able to at least master some words, colors, shapes, phone number, addresses, all those things. So it really opened up a whole world to her. And because of that interaction, we realized we didn't learn from a teacher or a doctor, we learned from other parents. And so this was the foundation of Pathfinders for Autism, the group that we founded later in 2000, and now it's 25 years old, where we continue to share what other parents have learned, and now educators and physicians. We've made a lot of progress in terms of awareness and resources. But only when I wrote the memoir did I realize that I, was a part of that and I had a leadership role in that right after I was paralyzed. And so I was able to, put paralysis on this one path and then lean into what I could still do, which was, take care of my daughter by finding some therapy and create an organization that could help other people, not just us. So you know, sometimes you just have to be aware of what is available to do. I mean, I would have never predicted I would have had that path, but I'm very grateful I have. And now we serve like 20,000 people a year with the support that we have. We have online support, social media support, a huge, uh, really robust website where you can get all kinds of information. Um, so out of that need to care for my child, I think uh, some ideas uh, came to pass with the help of a lot of other people that continue to help others, and that really makes me feel good that we've been able to be of service to others.
That's right, be of service to other through recovery and losses. And, just this Pathfinder to Autism, what is the website address if you want to quickly just
It's
share that?
yeah, it's www.pathfindersforautism.org.
Pathfinders to Autism, all one word.org. Okay, so of course,
Pathfinders for Autism.
okay, for perfect. Yeah, so I will be definitely dropping that link after our talk today in her stories Untold Facebook page, whatnot kind of thing. So everybody can feel free to reach out to that. Um, I know you were talking about caregiving, and this constantly comes up, and there's a validation of women's needs for rest, grace, and gentleness with themselves, and then encouraging community support. And I see this fully in Pathfinders to Autism, really, and how you extend and provide that care for Madison. I wanted to ask you if you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
Wow. I think it is to be patient with the process, that we don't get the answer all at once, and to take the next right step of what you need to do to care for yourself. The way I've found kind of this pattern for coping, which is number one, be very honest with how you feel about it. Be honest about your circumstance, accepting of the circumstance, and be honest about your capacity to deal with it. And if you can't, and most often we cannot do all this by ourselves. It's like you alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. Um, invite people to join you on this journey. I call it, who can you get in the boat with you to help you get through this difficult time? And these are people that can be encouraging or informative or have expertise that are valuable to you. So, and the third thing is to keep moving, to really avoid getting stuck. Uh, I think one of the things I realized when my 17-year-old brother died, I got to watch my parents go through a very deep grief, and they did it in very different ways. My father was very public about, how he was absorbing his grief, and he could talk about it, become a noted lecturer on grief about it. My mom was very private. She joined support groups. My sister was in high school, and that loss was a community loss because he was part of that community. I was in college, and so my college girlfriends helped me move through it. But my sister wanted to be with him, and so my parents had to get her specialized, help to make sure that she could process this more um, in a healthy way. So we're unique in how we get through our losses too. I don't think you can compare how you cope to another person's coping, but I do think in all of that, we all kept moving. It was in different ways, but we kept moving through the grief, accepting, our stages, and finding a community that can be supportive.
Yeah, and I think the thing about community is that it's so powerful beyond words, you know? And it's you build it through even just one person, because through that conversation it invites other people to join, even here as we speak. I mean, her story is untold, and her Germany Empowerment Society itself is also a community. It's welcoming to others to come forth to share their stories so that we can embrace and, give support to other people, maybe not directly but indirectly as well, because that's how, for example, that power that your story has, and I wanted to touch on, you mentioned, there was you talked about sparkle, sparkle moments, right? And I thought that was very inspirational. So I wanted to, stop here to just kind of mention that, because it's kind of one of your signature themes throughout your book and your newsletters, right? And it's sparkle moments, as you mentioned, is meaningful small joys or breakthroughs that lift you up during difficult seasons. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the challenge is to look for the sparkle.
Hmm.
And I think when I wrote that piece about it, it's like you look for the sparkle in yourself. Like, what are the things that you feel like are you can polish up? That you have a great outlook about something, or uh, and then the sparkle in others is like everybody. I like to say everybody sparkles somewhere, and especially if somebody's getting on my nerves, and I was like, okay, look for their sparkle. What do they do that's really sparkly, that's really something that I enjoy, that they bring to it? What is their positive quality? So it's another way to say your positive quality. When at the time, I take it literally. I like my sparkle jewelry. I have some sequin gold boots that I wear when I present.
Yeah.
And you're right, to your point, if you can't stand up, stand out. So I've got my sparkle where it reminds me that that's okay. I can still sparkle from a wheelchair. I don't have to stand
Yeah.
up to sparkle. So it's kind of an energizing thing. I think I had picked that for one of my theme words one year, and I've just kept it. Everybody talks about the sparkle. So it's something you can cultivate, you can look for. It's like read the room. What's in the room that sparkles? Nature is fabulous for that. My dog, oh my gosh, petting him, I could just feel his energy come into my energy. So he definitely was a sparkle generator. So yeah, got to
That's
look
true.
for it.
Pets are definitely sparkle generators. And, little moments of joy, like for me, like simple things like you have to wear glasses. Okay, fine. Then pick frames that are fun for you, that you enjoy. Because that one frame isn't a forever frame, but you can get another pair of glasses. So enjoy those moments. And that uplifts you. If that's what it is, then keep doing that. I think that's really amazing. Now, part of this whole writing process and sharing your story, right, as we progress along, right? How did you really manage to finish this book at the end? Like, there must have been some doubts in between along the ways. And then, of course, you inject your sparkle moments. You sought your community for support, but it takes quite a bit of strength, and dedication and perseverance just to push through to finish this book. So I'm kind of asking, yeah, wanting to learn a little bit more about this.
Well, the since the very beginning from that is that you email from my friend Scott, I kind of developed this group that would follow my writings. And so as I began Morning Fuel, I had them kind of help me keep accountable. I would say I'm going to write this book, and it had a different name back then. I said, this is the book I'm writing, and my goal is at 366. And so I would write my little normal, positive stories from time to time, and then I would give them a book update. I'm at 66 articles, I'm at 100 articles, I'm at 200 articles. Then I had a wrist injury where I couldn't use the computer, so I was out for 6 months. And and they would encourage me. And at the same time, I was like, I've told them I'm going to write this book. I really want to write this book. And so I just had to be patient with my recovery, and I got back on track, got it out. So I think that is part of it, is to set your goals. I went through all kinds of iterations. At one point, all of them were on sticky notes, and I had them all lined up against the wall. And then I graduated to an Excel spreadsheet, and I had, because I quote people, and it's like, I don't want to put three quotes in a row by this guy, so I got to spread those out. And then I had family members, and I was like, I don't want dad in there three times in a row. I had to spread those out. So it got to be very complicated, but I learned a lot. I didn't know that much about Excel. So, hey, and that's really what it's about. If you can adapt that's the old growth mindset. And my dad, way before that term was ever used, had this sentence that I have right there: no experience is wasted unless you let it be. And so this experience of writing, it's a pain in the butt, there's edits and rewrites and all that stuff, but what can you learn from that experience? Don't waste it. Even if it's a negative experience, what can you learn from it that could be useful in the future? And I think that's this whole pattern of being honest, getting people in the boat with you, keeping moving. That's what I learned, because time and time again, what could I learn from losing? This is what I've learned. There's a pattern to it. Stick to it, and make sure, and don't do it alone.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. I think what your dad said was very wise, no experience is wasted unless you let it go to waste, basically. And I'm a big believer in that because I think people say, "Oh, why do you do this? There's no point to do this." But you know what? Maybe there isn't a point at the precise time, microsecond at that moment. But later on, you'll be like, "Oh, I'm glad I did that." I could pull from that experience, and which aligns very much, with your book. Like you said, we are shaped by our stories, right? Which is very
Yes.
true. And with how you were unfolding with your post-its and whatnot kind of thing and all these setbacks happening, you mentioned we get to decide how many bites it will take. Yeah. And I repeat that, we get to decide how many bites it will take. And then I think at the end of it, you chose to love what you love now continuously.
Right.
And that's really powerful. So that leads me to the next question. What message do you have for women and girls around the globe today?
I would say stay curious, stay open to what life has to teach you, and keep moving, and don't do it alone.
And continue to remember that we are shaped by our stories. And I love that there was one more thing that you mentioned. You said encouragement is a difference maker. And that
Oh,
encouragement,
yes.
not just for ourselves, but for other people too. Yes, please expand.
Yeah, I think the root of encouragement is courage. When you look at the etymology of that, and it does take courage to keep going, and others can provide that. When you feel supported, you get a little braver to try things, and that's what it's all about, the courage to try something new. Well, if you got people in the boat with you and support of that, and people were saying, "Yeah, just go for it," and that's so important in trying to live the life you didn't plan, or going through any situation that you didn't plan for this, you didn't want this, and but yet you're here and you want to live fully. And that's what it's about, is living fully in the life you didn't plan.
That's true. And, there's this quote that says, life is what happens while you're doing something else, because life is really what happens while you're doing something else. And then you still keep continuously doing life, basically, right? So, in this conversation right now about navigating it through life, could you share with us some steps, tips maybe to push through when fear is holding you back? Like maybe some moments of when you encounter fear, you were scared, and how did you overcome this?
Well, I think it goes back to the honesty of the situation, which is, can you handle it? Can help with that? Um, the resources to get through it, um, and the momentum to keep going, and to keep checking in with people to make sure that they know where you are in the process. It's it's kind of a cyclical kind of thing. In fact, when you really look at the word rethinking possible, that's really another way of saying finding hope. When you accept where you are, and acceptance is a huge thing. When you accept something, it frees up all that space that of ambivalence to be open to act on what you've accepted. And I think that is huge, to get to the point where, for me, it took me 19 months to accept that I was paralyzed, that I wasn't going to walk again. And once I accepted that, I could let go of some things that didn't matter as much. I was missing dinner 3 times a week to go to a therapy to learn how to stand on parallel bars in a rehab center, and that I was missing dinner with my kids. And so when I decided, okay, I'm not going to spend my time trying to learn to walk, I'm going to accept life in the wheelchair and live fully in this life in the wheelchair. I was able to spend more time with my kids. I was able to figure out how to cook from the wheelchair, figure out how to, buy the accessible van so that I could be more easily transported. So there's a big freedom that comes when you accept that kind of thing, and it gives you, again, not empty but open to try new things.
That's a huge one, right there. And it really aligns with staying authentic, and then going back to what you said, rethinking the possible or the impossible to possible kind of thing, because of certain life is what happens while you're doing something else. You mentioned that it took you 19 months to come to this acceptance, right, about your situation. How did that come into being? Like, how did you decide that I'm just gonna accept and I choose, I'm gonna live a full life in the wheelchair? Because I think it's really powerful what you just said now.
There was a seminar given for and by spinal cord injured population. We had a speaker that came in, and he talked about the leading causes of death with the spinal cord injured population, which I wasn't expecting to learn that, and had to do with kidney failure and these other things. And then he said, in general, the spinal cord population has a life expectancy less than the regular population. And that was like, wow, I didn't know I'd been classified that way, and what a dark thought. And so it got me thinking about my life expectancy versus my expectations in life. And I decided then that I was going to have certain expectations for my life as a person in a wheelchair. And there was something about that lecture about how limiting life can be that made me want to push back at that and say, I can still do these things. And I made my list of what I wanted to do. I wanted to write, I hadn't published at all. I wanted to write about my life. I wanted to stay fully involved in my kids' lives and pursue um, nonprofit charity work toward their disabilities or mine. And that was before Pathfinders for Autism. So I had all these goals redefined based on living life in the wheelchair. And at the time, the last thing I could wiggle before my paralysis was complete was my left big toe. And I decided that night I wasn't going to try every morning and every night I'd try to wiggle that left big toe. And I decided after that seminar, and I wrote my expectations, I wasn't going to try to wiggle my left big toe. And I call these kind of big toe moments when you decide it is not worth the pursuit anymore, to take that energy back from that pursuit and pivot into an energy that's more worthwhile for you at that point in time.
That's yeah, I'm just what would you say is the most common negative thought pattern maybe that if you yourself struggle with, and of course if you've seen people struggle with, and how can they break free from it?
I think the question why is um, it can be stifling, it can be tormenting, it can throw you right in the middle of a pity pit. And one of the things I learned is that if we want to manage where our mind goes, I develop what I call shelves in my mind, like where I put things, these unanswerable questions,
Mhm.
like why? And I put it on a shelf in my mind, not to look through the why me, this undeserved thing that happened, to admit, accept it. Yeah, it's undeserved. Doesn't make any sense. Why did this happen to my brother, to my children, to myself? I don't know why. But I put it on a shelf. And the more important question is how? How are you going to live the life with this unanswered question? And I think a lot of our peace comes with the ability to live with unanswered questions present in our life, but to manage them so we're not looking at life through them, but they're managed on these shelves and we decide how we look at life. So I think that's one of the most tormenting questions can be is why. Um, but we can manage it.
That's actually a great visual way to share and present it, I think, because, instead of being stuck in the negative moments, you can say, hey, I'm going to shelve you and categorize you, put you in the cabinet right there. And then it's there. You can come back to it later if it comes up again,
Yes.
but it's there. But it's not taking over your entire space. You're not staying in the zone of negativity, nor are you staying in the state of mind of being a victim, for example, kind of thing of this circumstances, right? So you chose, and which is why earlier when you shared about wriggling that left big toe and how you made peace with that and then choosing the next step, there was so much growth that happened afterwards because now you freed up your mind and you put the wriggle toe in that cabinet, for example, and then you grew the space and then welcome other things into your life. I think that's really strong. Was there anything else that encouraged and further grew your personal growth and maybe in your guidance to provide to others? Like I know you mentioned your father and how he had a huge presence and he gave you some very wise quotes, to go by in life kind of thing, if you want to maybe expand a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up in a family of faith, and it's been hugely important to me. It's another primary fuel for me is the confidence of what's ahead. Uh, and I think that, my dad's meant one of his other quotes was what's planned is possible. And my mom's was bloom where you're planted. And those kinds of positive, forward-looking attitudes, and they walk their talk. I could see them do that. When my father had several pastorates, and everywhere we went, mother would get involved in the community, and she would bloom where she was planted. And some that's not only physically, but I think mentally, emotionally, when you're in a wheelchair, you bloom where you are, or when you're going through something you didn't want to, you figure out how to still not only survive it, but flourish in it. So I got to watch them, and especially after the loss of their only son, that had so much potential, for a water skiing accident. It was just bizarre. But to see them cope differently, but still flourish in their own way, and for us to mend this family of five to this foreign configuration of four, that we still wanted to be family, and we created new ways to be family. And so there was a lot of growth that happened, a lot of creativity. So those are the kind of things that I got to experience. Like say, it's kind of I had a front row seat to watching these amazing people, positive people, cope with unimaginable loss. And I drew from that. I didn't even know at the time of the lessons that you're learning until you have a chance to use them. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing this strong and resilient reflection. And I think right off the bat, I heard your mom and dad were really complimentary in their beliefs. Your dad said, "What is planted is possible," and your mom said, "Bloom where you're planted," and that's so very true. I think I wrote a reflection in my book too as well. Like you see these these wild flowers or weeds, growing around, yet somehow they're so strongly rooted because maybe they made a choice to say, hey, this is where I'm gonna bloom where I'm planted. So that was very powerful. And, you know, um, how do you have courage no matter where you are, who you are, and what circumstances you're in? Like, you know, maybe thinking about letting go does not mean giving up. It means creating space to move forward.
I think that's beautifully said. I think that how we view our circumstance determines a lot of the possibilities. And the more free thinking you can be, the more opportunities there are. And I think that the people in the boat with you that you've chosen to support you can be wonderful resources for that. They can give you ideas. And the other thing I want to say about this, because this was an interesting learning, you know, your crew and your boat can change. One of the things I learned with my sister, and we're very close. We talk every single day, even though she's in Florida and I'm in Maryland. But when we lost our parents, um, they died 2 years apart, and when we lost our mother, after my father's death, we realized we couldn't help each other in our own grief. That we were in our own grief. And so when we got together and talked about losing our parents, we made each other's worse. We didn't help, we couldn't help each other. And so we realized we had to get outside the immediate grief family and reach to other people that weren't so directly affected. And I think that's a really important lesson, because not everybody can be everything to you. You can't always rely. And sometimes you think, well, family should be there, but they're in their own grief. And so you've got to give them the space, and you have to create your own space where you can get other people that are really helpful. So for a while we felt like, well, why can't we do that? And then after a while we learned, of course you can't do that. You're in the same pity pit. You need to separate and get kind of fresh ideas, fresh takes on things.
That's so very true. And I'm very sorry, all these situations and losses and some, and then just finding all this, you know, again, it comes up. It's really about hope, kind of what your parents
Yes.
have repeatedly mentioned. And through my other interviews and talks, I remember I do recall conversations about how when you're stuck in the pattern or the community of grief in that situation, well, grief is never one and done. Okay. Um, we'll go back to that in a little bit. It's important to break it up, maybe even take a break, a little momentary break from it, and then just come back to it again later, right? Kind of thing. But by that time, like you said, maybe different people on this boat, the different people in this community, and then you have new thoughts and new capacity. So, going back to what I mentioned, grief is never one and done. Did you want to expand a little bit on that?
Sure. I like to say grief is a strange companion. It's not a linear process where you check the box and you got through this stage and this stage and this stage. In my experience, it will come up and touch you on the shoulder when you least expect it. You'll have this smell, you'll see something, somebody will say the same words, and it's a trigger for, oh my gosh, I really miss my dad, and he used to say that, or the Old Spice smell, and that's what or the perfume that my mom wore. All of those things are memories that bring that grief fresh again, and you start all over. So it's never one and done. I think it is a strange companion, but I've learned to, in a strange way, kind of welcome it because it only means how deeply I loved my parents or whatever the thing is that's provoked the grief, and to kind of respect it when it comes back and give it kind of a revered place. Like, oh, it's you again. Yes, and you give it the time and the space, and then you gently park it back on that shelf and say, okay, I really need to get on with my life right now. I respect you and you visited, but let's put you back up there so that I can get on and keep moving forward. So I think it's a strange companion. The other thing I think is it's as unique as your fingerprint. Nobody has a right way to do grief. It's very unique. I experienced it with my mom, my dad, my sister, myself. We all grieve differently. But the most important thing was to keep moving through it and process it and not ignore it, not bury it. Because if you don't deal with your feelings, they come out in other ways. And that's where this honesty about how you're feeling is so important. Because if you deny it, and then all of a sudden there it is, and you don't understand why you're behaving this certain way, and it's because maybe you've got delayed grief or unprocessed grief that's hanging around, kind of like this cloud that's around you, and then it manifests in a way that maybe not be healthy.
It's very true. And grief can in when that situation happened, for example, it could go into another type of emotion. If you go into anger, frustration,
Yes.
impatience, right? And then there can be chances where the individual or yourself not understanding what is going on. So it's almost like a deflection or a defense mechanism to mask the grief kind of thing. And that can very naturally happen to people. So grief is never one and done. And I really believed in that because when my father tragically passed away in 2004, I constantly would come back and grieve, but of course, you kind of learn to, it's kind of like a muscle. You learn to welcome this strange grief companion. Now it's at a stage in front, really relating to what you were sharing earlier, like you kind of honor it. You say, hey, grief, come on in, right? If you're gonna come by, just step on over here, and then you kind of go in to really reflect it. And I think with time, While nobody is really an expert on grief because it comes and goes, you can honor and welcome it and reflect on it, and then you choose that we get to decide, like, it can be a sweet memory now, kind of thing, right? You get to choose how that is while never, forgetting what really was. But then, and then you put it back on the shelf, as we mentioned, and then you come back when it come wants to come visit again. And I think it's a very, and thank you for this gentle reflection and reminder, and how we can kind of just beautifully navigate about it, this strange companion, as you put it. So grief is definitely never one and done. Now, I wanted to ask you, who should read your book?
Oh, anybody that enjoys a short story that might be inspiring or make you think or be encouraging, anyone that enjoys it, it is an entry a day. And some people are very funny about that. They'll like only read the day's entry. And, if they're behind, they'll go catch up. And others are like, they kind of graze. They like, oh, let's pick a day, any day, hit it and read it and see if it speaks to them. It's been a great connector. It was a great gift kind of thing if you wanted to stay in touch with somebody that's doesn't live anywhere near you, but you can be on the same page, so to speak, about that day. What did you think of what was, talked about that day? I think the reflective questions give you a chance to try to apply it, maybe stretch yourself a little bit. So another person said, it's kind of like poetry, how you like pick something up, read something, and then come back to it, and it kind of almost like a little reference thing. So I've been surprised at how people have found it helpful and useful and fun.
It is very true. And this, as you're explaining why positivity should be a part of the morning routine, and then, how to make it happen. And as at the beginning of the talk, I mentioned your quote, the world can wait. First, we fuel, right? And I think that 100% aligns with what you just shared now in exactly your book, right? So we fuel ourselves, just like how we start the day, for example, with breakfast, your cup of coffee, your tea, a glass of water, morning stretches or something, just waking up. The world can wait because it's still always going to be ongoing, but you need to first fuel yourself. So that's and honestly, I think this book is really geared towards anybody because you can find inspirations. What I like to do is sometimes I'll maybe not read in sequence, but just like, oh, flip open a page and see where that lands, right? And then it kind of gets sets you in motion into thinking about different topics, and then yeah, and then really reflecting, having an honest reflection with what's going on in your life, what has happened, right? So, my next question is, how do we get a copy of your book?
Oh, well, it's available wherever books are sold. I mean, of course, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, independent bookstores. I have a website too, BECKYGALLI, BeckyGalli.com, and that can
Yeah.
direct you to other outlets for purchase. So, and speaking of my website, would love to have folks subscribe to my Thoughtful Thursday, my a little newsletter I put out, not every Thursday, but when I have something to say, it usually comes out on a Thursday. So would love to have you there. I find tremendous joy with connecting with people and staying in touch with people, and so appreciate the opportunity to share the book and hopefully keep in touch with some of your subscribers too.
I'm sure they're going to be reaching out to you. And before we forget, if you want to share again the Pathfinder to Autism again, and just how people can reach you and what type of people should be looking at this website. Really, it's for anybody, I think. And then how do they, if it's not immediately happening to them or their families, like how can they share this, build this community, grow it even further?
So yes, Pathfinders for Autism is pathfindersforautism.org. And we have the website. that is very robust with resources. We also have staff. We're also on all over social media, Instagram, um, Facebook, and very interactive there. Uh, and my website, thebeckygalli.com. They can sign up there for my Thoughtful Thursday if you want to. And yeah, I think my be in touch with me. I think you click a button and you can email me too.
That's awesome. So don't worry, folks, because I'm going to be sharing the links later on after this talk. And so nobody's going to miss the link or information. You'll be able to freely reach out to Becky here. So, Becky, I just want to tell you your story reminds us that life doesn't always go as planned, but that doesn't mean it can't still be meaningful, beautiful, and bold. So, from paralysis to parenting, from grief to grace, and you've really shown us what it means to rethink what's possible, not just once, but every single day. And that's through your book, Morning Feel. And I also want to mention that, you know, um, you so powerfully remind us in Morning Fuel that if you can't stand up, stand out. Okay? And to all of you that's listening today, may we each find the courage to rise in our own way to fuel our mornings with intention and to live fully, even in the face of the unimaginable. So again, thank you very much, Becky, for reminding us that the resilience is not the absence of hardship, but the presence of spirit. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for being here. It was amazing and super uplifting, and I'm fueled up. So, wishing you a beautiful rest of the day, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye bye.